Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, the last of my vaguely festive themed videos for the Christmas weekend, I'd like to discuss Rishi Sunak's fairly extraordinary behaviour on Christmas Eve, as he asked a homeless man if he worked in business. Now, this is not the first time that the richest MP in history has demonstrated that he is potentially the most out of touch, but may just be an indicator that he isn't good at learning lessons. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is a bit of a gift from the Tories to the rest of us, really. Quite ironic that I'd be talking about this on Boxing Day. Boxing Day isn't something you really hear about around the world, I get that. It's particular to the UK. It's the day after Christmas Day and was an attempt by the wealthy in Victorian times to show a bit of love to those lower down the rungs of society. Servants to the very wealthy would, of course, work very hard on Christmas Day. They didn't really have any time to themselves. So their masters and mistresses could have their festivities. So the following day, they tended to get the day off. The rich would then give boxed gifts to the poor. The servants with their day off would also traditionally go home and give boxed gifts to their families as well. Hence Boxing Day. The day when the rich gave something back. And they did it a couple of days early this year, as the Tories reminded us that Rishi Sunak is going to be quite dismal in the heat of an election campaign. You know, as soon as he burst onto the scene, late 2019, I'd never heard of him before then, late 2019, filling in for Boris Johnson while he was hiding from election TV debates. He attempted to come across as very personable. You know, when he was made Chancellor shortly afterwards, he was constantly posting photos on social media to present him making a connection with others. You know, he clearly had ambitions for the top job at the point and was keen to present himself as the human Tory for when Johnson inevitably fell. The problem is that he seems to be one of the least relatable Tories in the parliamentary party. You know, there are some characters who have absolutely no understanding of life in the real world, including Boris Johnson himself, who's worth tens of millions of pounds, but they still somehow manage to be vaguely aware that there is another world that people inhabit and make some effort to pretend to learn about it. But Sunak is quite spectacularly awful. Earlier this year, he tried to have himself filmed paying for fuel for a very modest car. It was an attempt at a PR coup that turned into a PR disaster. Nobody believed it was his own car, and indeed it later transpired he'd basically asked for a member of staff to donate their car for the photo op in return for getting a full tank of petrol. But then he tried to pay for it and have himself filmed paying for it. It took some time for the teller to explain to Sunak how you use a chip and pin card to pay for the petrol, and I think he had a can of Coke as well. In one moment, what was supposed to be a PR stunt to make Sunak look relatable, it turned into public exposure to highlight that the man in charge of the country's finances doesn't even understand how to transfer money in a simple transaction. He was incapable of even paying for petrol. Just how cloistered was this man's life? You'd have thought he'd have learned his lesson. Seems not. Or maybe he's just so far out of touch that the lessons are too advanced. On Christmas Eve, he decided to have another crack at a photo opportunity to show him making a human connection. He went to a shelter and asked a homeless man if he worked in business. The man explained that he was homeless. Sunak, completely unaware that he dropped another bollock, persisted. He asked, well, have you considered getting into finance? Maybe, the poor man replied, but I just want to get through Christmas first. The Tory client media were out immediately putting out the fires, like they used to have to do for Boris Johnson all the time. Dan Hodges of the Mail said, well, I gather this place offers services to other people. It's not just for the homeless, you know. Trying to point out that Sunak wouldn't necessarily have known that the man was homeless at all. And maybe it worked on some. But the problem was that Sunak had promoted this visit as being specifically to hear from the homeless, people without a roof over their head. He'd gone there to meet homeless people on Christmas Eve. He just didn't seem to understand what that means. Maybe being homeless is when your property occupies less than 5 acres or something, I don't know. And of course, it's not just the asking about the job that's the issue. You could be homeless and in work. I was technically, for a very brief, thankfully, very brief period. You know, you can be living in your car, as I was, or you could be sofa surfing. You're still homeless. You don't have your own place, but you could still have a job. Though it's tricky But I'm not sure that even if you want to assume that a homeless man in need of food at a shelter might be in work at all. I mean, there's a very low probability, if we're honest. But even if you think, oh no, there's a good chance here, is it really appropriate to go straight to having a guess about which industry they work in? Wouldn't you just ask, are you in work at all first? But if you are going to do that, and you are going to think, oh no, this man looks like he's in work, and you are going to have a stab at what they do for a living, are you really? I'm not convinced that guessing that the job he has is in business is top of the list. I mean, naturally, the whole episode was roundly ridiculed. Enormous sympathy for the poor bloke, for whom Christmas is a time when he's in peril. It's not a joyous time of feasting and festivities for him. But this should be another shot across the bows to Tory MPs. In a way, Sunak is doing the job that the Tories needed. You know, after the unfettered largesse of Boris Johnson and the unhinged insanity of Liz Truss, Sunak has brought boredom back to politics. Just what the Tories needed. He's as dull as they come. He's woeful in interviews. He's terrible in PMQs. But his attempts at photo opportunities turn into modern episodes of Mr. Bean. See, that's more entertaining. That's no good for them. Right now, he can hide away. And he often does. He doesn't have to go and carry out these publicity stunts. He can just hide away in Downing Street and let more personable colleagues do the legwork. And presumably after this latest episode, it'll be another few months before he's stupid enough to go out again. The Tory media present it all in the best light they can. Job's a good one. But when it comes to campaign time, especially the general election campaign, he is going to have to turn up. I don't think he'll get away with dodging the debates and interviews like Johnson did. People will say, well, Johnson, you dodged the Andrew Neil interview and a couple of the TV debates in 2019. Yeah, the thing is, in 2019, the Tory media had already won the battle of the Prime Ministers. All they needed was to not trip up. So Boris Johnson got away with that. Shouldn't have done, but he did. This time, they're behind. And they'll remain behind if this is what happens whenever Rishi Sunak is filmed trying to connect with someone on the sharp end of life. You know, you remember that film of him as a teenager, maybe you didn't see it, it cropped up during the Tory leadership contest this summer, where he was being interviewed for a television programme about posh people in the suburbs, I think. And he was going on about, oh, these people, he's a wide circle, for, oh, I know people from this background and this background, oh, people from working class backgrounds. Then he corrects himself, oh, no, not working class backgrounds. You know, emphasising that he didn't know anyone from a working class background. You see the results of this detachment. Like, people live their own lives. Nobody really understands the trials and tribulations of at least some other groups. Everyone likes to think that they are the real deal. They're the real person. No one is. You know, there's lots of different groups. There's lots of different challenges in life and hands dealt. Some are bad, some are good. You know, no one understands other groups really. But even people dealt a very bad hand in life, they can be ignorant of the problems of others. Nobody's got all the problems in the world to identify with, but you can make some effort to at least listen, to at least understand the difficulties that people have. Educate yourself as to what life is really like for others, especially if you're going to go into politics. You will always be a bit detached from experiences that aren't your own, but you can still learn. I don't blame people who've never had to worry about the bills. If I weren't so stupid, that would have been me. You know, Sunak just doesn't even seem to grasp the basics of what life's like for people for whom stupidity didn't come into the question. They were dealt a bad hand from the start. They have to work hard just to keep their head above water. People for whom the basic standard of living can't be taken for granted, for whom budgets have to be treated with the utmost respect. There are no end of Tories who just don't get it. You know, trying to tell us we can eat meals for 30p or solve poverty by ironing old wrapping paper or cancelling Netflix. You know, some of them may be well-meaning, maybe they're trying to help. Some may just lack empathy, but they're all clueless to an extent. But even those Tories from an ordinary background always manage to pay the bills themselves. They don't fully understand. They allow themselves to believe it's because they worked hard. And therefore, if anyone works hard, they'll get the rewards. By definition, they reverse engineer that concept and say, well, if you're struggling, that means you're not working hard enough. But Sunak seems to be in a league of his own in just not recognising the issues. Like with him, it's not just the case that he doesn't relate enough to offer a serious solution to the problem. He simply doesn't actually get what the problem is. And you would imagine that this is going to cause more than a few issues during the crucible of election debates when the general election is finally triggered. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further. The join button for memberships. We'll be back on to 2 again tomorrow. But until then, I will see you later.